Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan, and today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Jamar Montgomery. Now, he reached out to me on Podmatch of all places, and he sounds like a very interesting fellow. He ran for U.S. Senate in 2020 and apparently met with Kanye and President Trump in 2022 and was at the World Economic Forum a couple years ago, which I've always wanted to go to. So we'll probably have to talk about that. But he sounds like a very fascinating fellow. He wanted to talk to me about politics and culture and all this type of thing. And so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of things to talk about. We're recording on the 10th of February. This will not air till much later, but I just finished doing the news hours. So this will be very, very good and important. So we're going to dive into a little bit about himself and his history, and then I'm sure have some good discussion. So welcome, Jamar, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. Pleasure to be here, Cameron. I know you were saying that you were been at this all day, so I'm glad that we were able to fit this in. I literally
Yes, absolutely.
jumped off another podcast to do this as well. So glad that we were able to make it happen.
Yes, it's a late. Yes, it's not so late for you, but certainly late for me here in the East. But that's okay. Why don't we begin from the beginning? Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So I guess where do you start? I am your favorite rapper's favorite political advisor. They usually do quite well and save a lot of money when they listen to me and when they don't listen to me. As we saw with Brother Ye. I started college at 11 years old, started full time at 14. I graduated at 19 with my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from California State University, Los Angeles. I went on to work for the United States Navy as a weapons systems engineer and was the youngest weapons systems engineer in the U.S. Navy's history. The system that is currently shooting down drones in the Red Sea, that is my system. While I was working for the U.S. Navy, I also was working for the NAACP. And there's where the bug to go to law school was put in my ear. I was helping people with discrimination complaints with the EEOC. And finally, after reaching a pinnacle of my career, I decided it was time for a change and I decided to go to law school. While I was in law school, I wrote a paper called Militarized Police and Unpermitted Protest, Implementing Policy that Civilizes the Police, and which was a paper that dealt with the protests that we saw in Ferguson, Missouri, when Mike Brown was murdered, as well as the police response to those protests. Being a glutton for punishment, or I would say a glutton for education, I also received my MBA. After graduating with my law degree and my MBA, I taught political science at Southern University in Shreveport. I practiced law as a juvenile public defender in Caddo Parish, and I ran for U.S. Senate in the 2020 elections. Those experiences led me to becoming highly sought after as a consultant and was received a call from Kanye West asking for help with his school, with Donda Academy at the time. That conversation and that meeting turned into me helping him with his campaign. He was deciding on whether or not he was going to run for president again. And later on turned into an invitation to accompany him to meet with President Trump. Everybody talks about Nick Fuentes, but they do not realize that Nick Fuentes was an afterthought. Milo Yiannopoulos was worried about the influence that I was going to have on Kanye, and so was doing everything in his power to make sure that Nick Fuentes accompanied us. After that, advised some UN diplomats, was invited to speak during the World Economic Forum, and I just got back from Switzerland maybe about 2 weeks ago. And so this has been my third year in a row that I've gone.
No, very exciting. Well, I can see how I've had so much trouble. I can't keep up with you. That's all quite impressive. It's yes, I have been eager to try to break into the world of people going to the World Economic Forum and haven't gotten there yet. This show's gonna have to get a lot more popular. Um, but I appreciate all that you have done, and my goodness, what a journey. I mean, given our state of politics today, I would have said mechanical engineering. That's much safer than um, than getting involved in law and politics. What a mess. What a disaster. Well, I mean, I guess we'll just dive in straight to the deep end. You've kind of already answered this question, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper in terms of why you decided to leave engineering behind and go into politics. Certainly the money in engineering is better.
It's less stressful.
Yes,
It's
yes,
less stressful, more structured. Um, but you realize what makes the world go round, and money makes the world go round, and politics determines what direction that the world turns. So I
yes.
realize the importance of getting involved in politics, and a lot of people complain about politics and talk about politics, but really don't take any greater steps into actually being involved in politics. Being in politics means more than just talking about it at the barbershop, talking about it at the dinner table. It's more than just voting. And if people are voting, then I already applaud them. I already applaud them. Um, the next thing is showing up to the city council meetings, showing up to the mayor's office, showing up to the state house and their state legislators' offices. It's also donating to their candidates, to the people that they want to vote, that they're voting for. It's also in at the end of the day running for office themselves and really getting an idea of what that's like. Everybody can tell you, everybody can tell you what it's like being in the stands of the Super Bowl or it being in the stands of a game, but only the people who have actually suited up understand the pressures and what goes on when you're actually on that field. And I encourage everyone to, at least one point of their time in their lives, to step on that field of politics and actually run for office.
No, no, that's certainly true. That's why I got out of campaigning and went into media. Much safer. Yes. I'll be on the silence of the microphone, telling people what's going on. That's where I belong, but that's okay. It's kind of mention you talk about people not just talking at the barber shop and actually getting involved in all this sort of thing. In the news hour tonight, I covered a story in Bloomberg about the the YouTubers that brought us Trump and how they were ever so, and it's Logan Paul and Andrew Schultz and Lex Friedman, Rogan, all these people, and how good they were at sort of mobilizing the people who don't usually get involved in politics because their shows are fundamentally apolitical. But as the election got closer, they started talking about politics, and that, probably turned out a lot of votes that would have ordinarily never bothered to vote or never engaged on this stuff and all this sort of thing. And so we have sort of some interesting new voices in politics that I think that we're used to, and that have normalized a lot of things that we are not used to having for those of us who do this all the time and are news junkies and all this type of thing. Um, what what I guess this kind of leads to the question of kind of what's wrong with Kanye West. But what do you think about all these new and interesting voices and people we have in politics now who don't really engage with politics, but just sort of have a very surface level headlines only view, but that always seems to tilt in one political direction? What is your view of all that?
Uh, I've One of the things that I think is people are more inclined to lean to people that lean towards them.
Mm,
And Trump was willing to engage with these people. And it
true.
really shows some of the brilliance of his team, that and how connected his team was, and saying, hey, there's legacy media and then there's non-legacy media. And the young people and people who more people are listening to podcasts and watching YouTube that are not traditional voters versus people who are not traditional voters who are watching legacy media. And if you really want to reach these people in an organic and an authentic way, these are the platforms that you need to go to. And so there's this dual connection of President Trump connecting with these people, and then these people feeling a sense of connectedness, and that, wow, a former president is willing to come on my platform
Yeah.
and have the conversation. And we didn't see that with Kamala Harris. And maybe we would have seen it if she would have been given a lot more time. However, uh, you know,
107 days is not a lot of time to do much of
it's
anything in
it's not
presidential
a
politics.
it's not a lot of time at all. And so had she been given more time, I think that there could have been a more effective strategy when it came to her being on the Shannon Sharp, on on Club Shay Shay, on
Yeah.
being on the Breakfast Club, on being on even on Joe Rogan, right? On being on Patrick PBD's podcast with Valuetainment, right? Being able to have the conversation. So even if, let's say, these people are lean in a certain direction, at least their audience feels that you respected them enough to at least come onto a place where you normally probably wouldn't show up at.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I did see early on in the cycle that this was going to be an election of influencers, and the conversation had shifted online, and I had made mention of it. Several people had made mention of it. I was disappointed. I have been and am continuing to be disappointed in the Democrats Party's lack of engaging with any of us at all. I realize you're not going to call me. I'm too small. I only do a few thousand a week. Okay. But there are some heavy hitters over here. They're not on David Pakman, Kyle Kulinski, TY. No one can stop by TYT. We can't send out any surrogates to go say something at some. And even now, even in kind of the hour of their and our destruction, they still can't really bother to take any of us seriously, and it's kind of like we don't exist. And I think that is an interesting, if unsustainable, way of doing things. And I think, it's like if you want to reconnect with people and all this sort of thing, it's happening out here. Like it is happening, it is happening in those places, in those spaces, all this type of thing. What do you think is the residency of Democrats in general to not engage with what I called last Thursday in a live event I did about the subject, the new media?
Um, you're dealing with the corporate party.
Right.
You're dealing with the corporate party, and so you're actually going to have more success dealing with local candidates, with local candidates, engaging with podcasts, as well as state candidates engaging with some of these lesser known platforms, especially if you're able to show that you have some reach or have some influence in those areas. But it shows that the reason why the Democrats are out of touch is because they're not touching the people. They're not utilizing their tentacles to go out into these other areas and at least be connected in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And it makes you feel, hey, we share some values, we share some beliefs, but you're not even willing to engage with me. Like from being in campaigns, there's some field director that knows about me. There's some field director
Yeah.
that they're just willing, even with having a statement from the candidate, or having one of the field staff come and talk about the particular candidate on the podcast, right? But they're not even engaging in that kind of way.
No, no. No. It is very much across the board, even for the biggest shows that agree with them. And it's funny because I've had some state level people on this show. Um, and I also, and it's kind of, I was interviewing someone a couple weeks ago, and he was quite surprised at the political leanings of this show, because he's kind of like, well, podcasters are usually, more right wing. And I said, no, we're out here, we exist. There's a lot of us. I'm relatively small potatoes, sort of thing. Um, but it is interesting in terms of in the bookings, there's a lot of right-wing people that will approach me to come on this show. I can't think of the last time I've had a leftist person on this show, and I'm a left-leaning show. I was top 50 for news politics podcasts on Podbean last year. Higher than Mark Levin, actually. Like, I mean, I do travel in some rarefied sort of thing, and I don't. Those booking requests never seem to come through. Um, and I find that deeply frustrating, because I'm smart enough to realize this is where the conversation is happening now. And the party's going to have to engage one way or another. I just don't, it just doesn't seem, I'm not seeing any desire from leadership at this moment to engage with that at all.
The reason why is they're thinking that they have it on lock. That's really what it comes down to, is
Yeah.
that they don't feel that they have to win hearts and minds. What the Democrats have been banking on have been saying that Trump is bad, but
Yeah.
have not presented anything in and of itself. And it's when you look at their strategy, it has always been, we have to do everything to prevent this person from being in office.
Yeah.
Well, if we do everything that to prevent a particular person from getting into office, you're not actually pushing anything for yourself.
Right.
And so if you're not pushing anything for yourself, then there's this entire section that is actually a blind spot for you.
Which
And
is sad, because we just went through 4 years of major pieces of legislation. The first time we've had an industrial policy since the 1960s. I mean, the Biden people were busy. They were not lazing around the White House reading newspapers, all this type of thing. And so it's kind of funny that in the aftermath of Inflation Reduction, chips, a decent infrastructure bill, funding high speed rail for the first, all this sort of thing. I mean, a lot of major blue chip accomplishments, that there's still that perception, earned or not, that the Democrats aren't necessarily, fighting for something, or don't have their own ideas of how to move things forward and all this type of thing. But I think that gets into narrative perception. I talk about this stuff a lot. It gets into narratives and perception. When the narrative goes a certain direction, that's, if you don't control how you're perceived, someone else will do it for you. Um, and I think that, it has become, I think, because the narrative was Trump is bad, Trump has to be stopped. And that's what really kind of hit and resonated, for better or for worse, with people. Um, all the talk about policy kind of never got critical mass, sort of thing, which I find interesting, troubling, kind of sad. But I agree with you. I agree with you. The if your only message, perceived or actual, is that one person's about all this type of thing, then that's a very hard election to win. It only worked once, sort of thing. It's not necessarily going to work twice. I do have a question about candidate quality. Um, I think one of the difficulties Democrats have had 2 out of the last 3 cycles is the candidates we've put at the top of the ticket. Um, Biden, for all of his faults, was very lovely and got the job done. Hillary Clinton has died on this hill. Kamala Harris has now joined her. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think that the fact that we have, of the last 3 people we've put up, 2 of them have been women, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad, with 1 being not at all, 10 being the most, do you think that has hurt the party and the perception of the party?
candidate quality, I don't think that candidate quality has been the issue.
Oh,
Uh,
see, I would disagree. I think the big problem is that we've put women at the top of the ticket 2 out of the last three.
I don't
I,
think
I
that
think that's I think that's been incredibly damaging.
I don't think that's been the problem at all.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think that's been the problem at all. I think the problem has been the inconsistent messaging. We're for the
Hmm.
we're for change and for the future, but you keep putting the same. You put how are you for change? And the only thing that you're changing is not that this is a career politician, but that she's a woman,
Yeah.
right? How are you saying that you're for change and for progress, yet we're clearly watching you go through cognitive decline and you've got
Right.
your vice president who's a spry woman, you're not prepping her. And then all of a sudden you what? So
Right.
I don't think that the issue is I don't see the issue as being candidate quality, and I actually don't believe that the issue was that Kamala does that play a part in it? Yes, but it's more so of Kamala failed because Biden didn't drop out like
I
the year
mean,
before.
yes. No, I mean, I had no, very seriously, to your point, fall of 2023. I had multiple friends, one who's a communist, that's how far left my friends go, all the way to the middle, calling me, being like, when are they going to dump Biden from the ticket? We can't have this man run again. We're going to lose everything. Like, we cannot. I mean, everyone was freaking out. And I said, ultimately, it's his to decide. I don't see any movement that he's not running. They filed paperwork. I don't like it any better than you do. I wasn't a fan of him the first time, to be very honest with you. I, like many people, just didn't want 4 more years of Trump. Um, and so, yeah, I'm like, I'm hoping he dropped, but and then when he didn't and they were running, it's kind of like, okay, we'll see how far this goes. And then the wheels fell off the wagon way too late. And here we are. And I think it's also important to remember, in my view, and I think in the view of many people, Kamala Harris didn't even sound like the vice president until about January of 2024 anyway. Molly Jung Fast wrote an article in 2022 saying you're kind of failing as you're the first woman vice president. No one knows where you are. No one can seem to find you. You don't seem to do anything, and you haven't made your name on an issue. Pick something, anything, and become known for it. I guess no one at the vice president's office read that article. So I think, it was just kind of a general sort of a mess.
I
What was your view of that?
I see that Kamala Harris was a threat to the Biden administration. And so
That's
we have
true.
to remember that Kamala Harris was put there, was chosen by Biden to lock up the black and the female vote,
True.
right? And not excuse me, black, female, and immigrant and and particularly South Indian vote, South Asian vote.
Yeah.
So they were getting a forfer with Kamala Harris. So she was there for a particular reason. And now Biden could not have it such that you have this person who 20 years younger than him, right?
Right.
Could not have this superstar start to actually shine because then the question would be Biden, when are you dropping out? You should be dropping out. Like, hey, we get it. This will be your lame duck presidency. You really should start shining some of the light on Kamala versus him continuing to do what he's doing. And what gave me an indication to that with the coup that went on within the Democratic Party was that Kamala Harris was not in on that coup. Otherwise, if she was in on it, she would have been much more prepared for it.
No, I mean, no, here's no, we have, when we had it inside at the time and we now have it confirmed, Obama and Pelosi wanted to have an open convention and pick someone else. That's why everyone was talking about Andy Beshear of Kentucky, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, maybe Gavin Newsom of California. No one who has power in the DNC was talking about Kamala Harris. Biden endorsed her to basically screw them all over for shoving him off the boat. And then basically he put them in a position of, Do you want to really deny this to the first woman black vice president? Like, do you want black people to continue voting for you? Like, sort of thing. Basically, force them to be kind of like, well, I guess we're going to have to line up behind her, won't we? Sort of thing. I mean, and to your point, all of this happened, and she was not in any of those conversations. And then there was the question of what about the money? What about the fundraising? What about the donors? All this type of thing. Well, she's already on the ticket, so she's got that going for her and all this type of thing. And I think it was a phone tree system getting everyone in line to be kind of like, no, we're doing this. We have 100, like, we have 100 and, 70. No, we're really doing this. Like, so start writing the checks, sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I mean, I don't blame her entirely. I think she was very much a victim of circumstance. We know that the White House chief of staff under Biden did not like her. They had kind of sidelined the vice president's office anyway. They did not want her around. And people joked in 21 and 22, where is she? Like, where is this woman? Haven't seen her, haven't heard a peep, sort of thing. And I think I agree with you. I think that was partially intentional on the part of the Biden White House. They did not want her running around too much or too often, going too far, all this type of thing. Um, just your opinion. Her name is being put up for 2028. I think that's a disastrous decision. What's your thought?
2028, I'm not voting for her.
Yeah.
I'm not voting for her. And I didn't vote for her in this past election. But you know, I need my president to do three particular things for me. And it was already shown that during the Biden administration and in Kamala Harris's messaging that she wasn't speaking to the issues that were most important to me. For myself, I tell, I tell my clients, I tell my students, there are 1,000 hills that you can get distracted and die on. You need to pick the three that you can live and thrive on. So if you're voting simply out of identity, if you're voting simply out of party, those are the most rudimentary ways in which you can vote. And I'm I don't think that it's a good idea for her to run in 2028. She'd have a much better chance running for governor of California than she would with the presidency. I don't think that, yeah. Nope. I don't think that's a
No, I'm not. No, I'm not surprised. There's a lot. I mean, yeah. There's a lot of people who are kind of. I mean, there's a small cadre of people who think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea. I think a lot of the parties think that's a good idea. Um, I do think it is sad that this will probably be the end of her career in national politics, which is really sad because our bench on the Democrat side isn't that deep, and it's sad to lose her when she's relatively young as politicians go. We could have gotten a good another 10 years out of her, sort of thing. But yeah, very, very sad situation. Ironically, I've read some rumors that they don't want her to run for governor in California either. So I don't know. She may need to join Michelle on the book circuit and the speaking circuit. Um, sort of thing. Well, what are you doing currently in this present political environment? How are you surviving and getting through the chaos in which we find ourselves?
Well, like I said, there's 1,000 hills to be distracted on and die on. I'm focused on the three hills that I live and thrive on. That's crypto, business, and tax policy, and the Second Amendment. So I knew that this was going to be a wild 4 years, and I'm hyper focused on those three things. Um, I crypto saved my life. I met my wife through crypto, and that's what keeps my bread buttered, and that's what I'm focused on. It's a little concerning seeing what they're doing with Doge. It's a little concerning. Uh, it's a little concern. It's there. I have concerns. I have some concerns. I also am recognizing that this is being treated. This country is being treated like a large money grab. And how dare I be watching that and not have a cup, a bucket, or a dump truck for me to pour some into to pour into myself.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm
There,
encouraging everyone around me is look, in chaos, that is the best time to build. Because in chaos, everybody is focused on the big things where the resources are. And you're able to build quietly and silently and often uninhibited. So take advantage of this period.
yeah, that's I mean, yes, that is that is an interesting combination of issues, although not an uncommon one these days. And I'm not surprised about the crypto thing. I know that alternative assets have become very popular in minority communities for obvious reasons. And so I was an early crypto person and bailed a long time ago. And I did trading and I bought Bitcoin at $60 and sold it when it was at 600. Um, I made a nice chunk of change. It would be bigger now, but so I definitely understand that. I always laugh when you say the Second Amendment. Every time I do a Second Amendment video, it always does numbers and I turn off the comment section. Because it gets wild. I peeked in there one time for about 5 comments and left quickly. Um, especially because I have a very particular odd set of views on that, but it always draws a crowd sort of thing. Um,
Let's do numbers then.
Well, I mean, well, yes. I mean, if we talked about it, the clip of it would do very well. But no, I mean, it's when it comes to something like the Second Amendment, I always tell people, I come from a military family. I grew up with a 22 by the door in Northwest Arkansas. I've been around weapons all my whole life. I view them as tools, and I think most people should take the same idea. I've had clients who worked in the weapons trade and I've organized shooting events. One time we organized an event for the royal family of Sweden in Colorado to come and shoot exotic weapons. I have no problem with it. I do think we are a bit lacking in rules and regulations on who can own what, where, when, and why. I think some things like universal background checks are excellent ideas. And most Americans agree with me on that. So I feel pretty safe that the wisdom of the people um, have come together on that. What I find I think most worrying and disturbing about that whole thing is the I'll say it, cult-like nature of the subculture that has developed around all of that. I think that's a bit disturbing sort of thing. And I just wish it were less of a polarized issue and more of a sensible one of how to deal with a certain sort of thing in our society, like cars. That's how I view them. Like cars, we require people to be licensed and have them insured. I think something like that is probably also a good idea, sort of thing. I view it as a very common sense. This is a thing in our society. Let's have some rules around it that make sense for everybody and go on with our lives. Most people will still be able to own whatever they want to. However, and when I do a TikTok clip of this segment, people will complain. There is a subsection of people that act like any gun regulation whatsoever is just, an affront to the very idea of America, with mom and apple pie too. Um, so
I
sock
could
it
under,
to me. What have you got?
I could understand. I could understand those perspectives, right? And let's go into what the Second Amendment says: a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And what
And
a lot of
people
folks,
focus a lot on clause 3 and not so much on clause 1 and 2.
well, there are three words that are capitalized in the Second Amendment. And what happens when we capitalize things? We turn them into proper nouns, meaning that there is a specific definition, particularly a specific legal definition for those three things. That's militia, state, and arms. There are specific, there's supposed to be specific legal definitions for those three words. Because we have not specifically defined what arms are, is where a lot of this trouble we have gotten into. Because the Second Amendment is clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right?
Right.
But we have not defined what are arms. I'm of the thought that if my police are able to have them, I should be able to have them. Why am I of that thought? Our Constitution makes it clear that everyone is a citizen, that everybody underneath the Constitution, citizens are bound by the Constitution. Just because you're a police officer, all that means is that you are a sworn citizen. You've sworn an oath to the Constitution. So you're still a citizen. The only distinction that there is between a citizen and somebody that is in the military. So if my military, if only my military is able to have access to it, and citizens are not, then police officers are included in that, and I'm all for that. But if my
Yeah.
police are able to have it, and I'm not able to have it, I have a big issue with that. So if we're going to say that military weapons, right? Because let's be clear about firearms. Can you use them for recreational purposes? Absolutely. But
Of
what were they
course.
designed to do? To kill people.
Yes,
Point
they are weapons
blank
of war.
period, right? Point blank period. Let's not play any games about that. Let's not do this mental gymnastics. Now, why was the Second Amendment there? We have a revolutionary history in this country of not trusting our government. So,
True.
once again, if you're going to say that my police are able to have it and they are citizens just like me, that they're given an elevated status above me and are able to have this kind of power over me, when that's the whole reason why we have a military, I have a big issue with that. So,
Yeah.
because we have not given specific legal definitions to militia, state, and arms, that's why the reason we're in this trouble. And we can make historical arguments, this, that, and the third, but it comes down to it. There's a reason why the Constitution is written the way that it is, and we keep ignoring the fact that there are three words that are proper nouns there.
That is a excellent and new and compelling argument I have not yet heard, so 10 points to you. Um, Although I will say I feel like the Supreme Court cleaned up a lot of that in the 2008 Heller decision. They seem to clean up a lot of the ambiguous language around the Second Amendment. And also granted people pretty much broad rights to buy and own weapons. So but I'm not a lawyer and you are, so I'll take your word for it. But um that's fascinating. Well, we're at the 46th minute and it's late. Although we did start a little bit late. I do want to do a final question though. So you said one of your issues was the Second Amendment, crypto. What was the third one?
Business and tax policy.
Business and tax policy. Yes, I think my final exploration will be on that subject. Obviously, we know, I mean, the GOP has been OG, lower taxes for business people. When I was in Republican politics, that was a given sort of thing. And obviously, the Democrats want to raise taxes a whole lot. I'm a big fan of good taxes for business because it supports a thriving society and it supports a good middle class. Give me your view on business and tax policy.
When when I watch a company like Amazon pay $0 in federal taxes, it's sickening. And the reason why it's sickening is because Amazon uses my electrical infrastructure. They utilize my roads that my tax dollars paid for. They utilize my resources, my natural resources, and national infrastructure that my tax dollars paid for. Yet they're able to be a beneficiary of it without pouring back into it. I have a big problem with that. I also have a big problem with the IRS hiring thousands of new agents to audit small business owners who are literally the backbone of this country, yet and individuals, yet do not go after these do not go after these large corporations because it's seen as too expensive. We have a very convoluted tax code in the United States, and the tax code, point blank period, is designed for wealth and job creators. It is not designed for employees. I have, I would like to see a world where even if you get hired by a company, even if you get hired by a company, that you have the option of being treated as a contractor.
Hmm.
So
Well,
why am I saying that?
tech companies in Silicon Valley love you already.
Right? Why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? I'm saying that in terms of, if I'm not necessarily given the same protection as an employee, what I am given are the tax benefits of a company. Help me be able to take advantage of the same tax benefits that are not available to me as an employee. Okay, I'm being able to move in a particular way that, okay, well, I get an extra $30,000 in benefits as an employee, but as a 1099, I pay $30,000 less in taxes. I think I might be able to find a better use of that $30,000 in taxes and still have a similar level of benefits than if I was as an employee. So that's one way of looking at it.
Well, I mean, I can't disagree with you. So I've spent most of we haven't we haven't talked about me at all, which is good. I've spent most of my life working as a contractor. I've only been a W-2 employee maybe two, three times. I spent most of my life freelance writing, working with people. I used to get marketing clients on the street. I would walk down a block and go into businesses and sell and close the deal and walk it out that one with a check and into the next one. And so I've been filing my own taxes. I've had multiple corporations in different states for a very, very long time. I'm very familiar with that world. Um, and I'm also very familiar, with the whole W-2 employee thing and how much of kind of a tax racket that can be. Um, there's a lot of businesses that are going in that direction, especially like now that I'm more at the executive level in my old age at 30, I'm 37 in April. In my old age, I'm more at the executive level now. That's increasingly more common. And especially at the higher end of the professional class, there's a lot of people who, work for themselves, have an LLC for tax purposes, or work as independent contractors, all this type of thing. So I definitely, I get that. And I agree with you. The tax code is written for business and job creators and things like that. They're the ones that pay the lobbyists, that put the people in office, that write the tax code. They've spent decades working away at that sort of thing. And yes, it is the common everyday person working the W-2 job that pays a lot of money and everything and all that. But the businesses would come back and say 47% of people in this country on net don't pay taxes. It all goes back to them during refunds in the spring. And so it's really 53% of the country that's kind of paying all the bills plus a bunch of other things. But on the whole, I agree with you. I mean, it's it is a very complicated thing. I feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this, and we'll get you out of here. Um, I feel like that future you want is probably likely coming whether we like it or not. I think the age of the employee as we've known it is coming to a close. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and if that happens, then we really need to go back. Herman Cain had a great plan, the 999 tax plan.
R.I.P. Herman Cain. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it is. Yeah, there is. Yeah,
Simplify the tax code.
yeah,
Simplify the tax code, 9%, 9%. Now, what does that allow for you to do? It allows for you to grow at a more steady pace, at a more
yeah.
steady and predictable pace. And what happens? You eliminate all those tax lawyers. You eliminate you
Yeah.
eliminate all of that, and you simplify things. So anytime that you get a lot of opposition to something, you have to look at who's getting paid as a result of the inefficiency.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, tax attorneys, Intuit, the company who owns TurboTax, I mean, all the tax. I mean, there's a huge industry. This is one of the reasons why we have the op system. In most countries, they send you a bill and you pay them and it's over with. In this country, we have this stupid filing reporting game we have to play. The reason why that still is because there's too big an industry behind doing it. There's all these people who make their money, and if you get, like, I have a buddy of mine, he does tax tax relief and negotiates for people who have late taxes and all this sort of thing. I mean, and he makes enough money. He has a team of 11, and they all get paid six figures a year. And he wouldn't mind me saying that because he doesn't make it a secret sort of thing. Um, you know, and he's offered me to come on the team if this whole talk show thing doesn't work out. And so it's and so there's a whole industry that's incredibly well paid around all this stuff. So I quite agree with you. But it's no that yeah, I mean that makes sense. I totally get why that's a passion for you, and it's no, that's very vital. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I do definitely don't have my political ideas narrowed down to three specific issues or ideas. My political theories are much more broad and systemic, and principled, but that's a conversation for another day. So, why don't you let us know where we can keep up with you online and where we can keep the conversation going with you?
Absolutely. Dr. Jamar Montgomery on IG, as you can see, Dr. Jamar Montgomery on IG, on TikTok, and also on YouTube, and www.drjamarmontgomery.com, DRJAMAR Montgomery, MONTGOMERY.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Pleasure being here.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.